This is our VPP video for Lesson 14 vocabulary words. Our first word is pallid. Our sentence is, Teresa had a pallid complexion and looked like she might get sick. Pallid is an adjective and it's being used to modify complexion. Hopefully you know what complexion is. If you don't, it is talking about skin, the color, the texture, the appearance of the face. And so this adjective is telling us what kind of skin Teresa has. If you look at the end of the sentence, it's going to give you a clue as to what it means to say someone's complexion is pallid. When someone looks like they're going to get sick, oftentimes their face gets very pale, the blood kind of drains from their face. And so if your complexion is pallid, it means very pale. Pale and pallid sound similar, so use that word pale to help you remember the definition. Faint in color. Colorless. Again, as I said, the color drains from your face. Hardy and robust would be opposites. For pallid, you might also want to think of a corpse. Obviously, not a nice thought, but that's usually what happens when someone dies. They lose the color and the complexion becomes very pale. I've added some pictures for you this time to hopefully help you remember what these words mean. So here's a picture of a young lady who has very, very white, pale skin. She almost looks goth. So that would be pallid. Our next word is epitaph. This is a noun, and it says the epitaph on the tombstone said the following, beloved wife and mother. So tombstone is your clue. Also that saying, beloved wife and mother. It's an inscription on a tombstone. A brief comment. Obviously, it's going to be brief because you can't have long speeches put on a tombstone. But a brief comment about a deceased person, someone who has passed away, something that you say in order to honor them usually. So the picture that I put on is kind of a joke here, but this might be an epitaph for modern times. Died from not forwarding that text message to 10 people. Next is alacrity. This is a noun. Do not dally, you should know what that is already, but move with timely alacrity. So our context clue strategy is going to be the opposite context clue strategy because dally means to waste time, to slow down. Alacrity is the opposite of that. Timely is used to describe alacrity, so that helps us figure it out. It means liveliness, willingness, eagerness. You want to do it. You have enthusiasm. You're working quickly. You're ready. You don't have to be told over and over to get things done. You have zeal. The opposite would be slowness or reluctance. So for alacrity, I put a picture of a sprinter in the Olympics because obviously if they're dallying, all of their training has gone to waste. They're not going to win that gold medal in the race. He is moving with alacrity. Our next word is jargon. This is another noun. Specialists in information technology use computer jargon. So the type of jargon we're talking about is computer jargon that almost no one else seems to understand. Jargon is a vocabulary distinctive to a particular group of people. So for example, if I need help here at school with my computer and I get somebody from IT to help me, Mrs. Wire or Mr. Sawtell, and they're trying to explain to me what's wrong with my computer, I've often said to them, please translate that into English because since I'm a non-techie person, I have no idea what they're talking about. A lot of times that will happen if you go to a doctor's office. In fact, the picture I put up has some medical jargon, things that most of us wouldn't understand, like the word cardiomyopathy, arthroscopy, hypertrophic. If you look at all of those terms, unless you are in medicine or maybe you've had those particular conditions, you're not going to understand what is being said. So you're going to say to the doctor, please speak English so that I can understand what you're talking about. Lawyers have their own jargon. Oftentimes that's called legalese. Teachers, we actually have our own jargon, words like pedagogy and objectives and IEP, which is a lesson plan or a plan that you would use for somebody who has accommodations. So really each profession has their own type of jargon. Next is frivolous. Despite the seriousness of the topic, Edna remained frivolous, playing everything for laughs. So some kind of clues here are um, laughs, playing, and also the opposite context clues strategy. Seriousness is the opposite of frivolous. If you are exhibiting frivolous behavior, you're being silly. You're being trivial. Trivial means something that's not important. Inconsequential. Vain, meaning you are very obsessed with yourself. And the opposite would be vital. If something's vital, it's extremely important. That comes from the Latin. Think about people taking vitamins. They're important for health. So frivolous is unnecessary. Here's a picture which might kind of give you a laugh here, but obviously it would be a very frivolous, silly way to use dollar bills if you have them in your bathroom as toilet paper. What a waste. That is just outrageous. Next is lateral. John made a lateral career move by taking a new job with no change in salary. So lateral is an adjective. It's telling us what kind of career move he's making. If you make a lateral career move, it's of or relating to the side. So he would not be getting a promotion. He would not be getting a demotion. It would be like he took a job where he would get the same salary, but it's just another position. So let's say he was in charge of human resources at his company. If he moved to another department, let's say operations, and he's making the same salary and he doesn't really have any more responsibilities, then it's a lateral career moves. So of and to the side. Think of lifting weights. There are lateral arm raises. You have a weight in each hand and you're raising both of your arms up. Okay, that's lateral. Also in football, there's what's called a lateral pass. The quarterback passes the ball to the receiver or running back, whoever's getting the ball to the side, a lateral pass. Our next word is judicious. Of course, the word judge is going to help you figure out what this means, and it's another adjective. You expect judicious opinions from the Supreme Court. So it's modifying or telling us more specifically what kind of opinions are being made. And so we expect our judges to make wise decisions. So it means showing sound judgment, sensible, wise, careful. The opposite would be foolish, impractical, or prejudicial. It doesn't always have to be related to a courtroom scenario. Your mom might say to you, please make the judicious decision of studying for your test, which is tomorrow and which you need a good grade on, instead of just playing Xbox for hours. Here's a picture, though, of the Supreme Court to kind of help you remember judicious has to do with judges. Next is carnage. This is a noun. The carnage was shocking during the American Civil War. About 620,000 Union and Confederate soldiers died. So we're dealing with war, so it's pretty easy to figure out that carnage is bloody and extensive slaughter. Okay, the word carnal has to do with the body. So we have lots of people being killed in these war scenarios, bloodshed, slaughter. So I didn't want to get too graphic in our picture here, but I did take a picture that I found from World War II, and we have a couple of corpses here on the beach. I'm not sure if this is Normandy on D-Day, but anyways, you get the idea. Carnage has to do with the casualties, typically after a war. Maybe it's a shooting spree, which unfortunately has happened in our country many times now, like Columbine and San Bernardino, just really not too long ago. Carnage. Next is catalyst. Now, this is typically used in chemistry. Mrs. LaFlamme will teach you this next year, or Mrs. Miller if you take honors chem, but it can also be used in other contexts, like we have here in this sentence. William Styron's time served in the United States Marine Corps became the catalyst for his novel, The Long March. And this is true. This guy was in the Marine Corps around the Korean War era, so like 1950s, and he was forced to be a part of this 26-mile march in North Carolina around Camp Lejeune. And so he had a very negative experience, and he decided that he would write a novel about his experience. So it's kind of like cause and effect for catalyst, and it is a noun. So a person, thing, or agent that speeds up or stimulates a result, a reaction, or a change. So as a result of his experience in the Marine Corps, he decided to write a novel for it. Mechanism, vehicle, means would be synonyms for that. You might say something like this: because I failed the last test in geometry, it became a catalyst to cause me to study even harder for next test. So this picture I put for catalyst because it's a picture of the atomic bomb, and if you know your history, the way that we as Americans finally got out of World War II in the Pacific theater and the Pacific part of the war was by dropping the bomb on Japan in two cities. And so it sped up the end of the war for us in the Pacific part of the world. Our next word is foible. This is kind of a funny sounding word, and it is a noun, and honors should recognize these two names. Brutus forgave Cassius his foibles, but not his blatant lapses in judgment. So this is the opposite context clue strategy. A blatant lapse in judgment is a big character flaw. Foible, on the other hand, is a minor weakness in a character. It's a fault, it's a shortcoming. So it's not something huge, but it is something that you probably would want to work on. And so I took or put a picture on here of a modern day example, Cam Newton. A lot of people were very upset about his behavior after the Super Bowl, the way he just kind of bluntly and shortly answered the reporters and even kind of walked out of that one interview. And so I found this picture of him. He's obviously got a depressed look on his face after being defeated by the Broncos. And here's actually a quotation from an article that I found on the internet where foibles was used, describing Newton. Yes, Newton should have publicly owned up to his foibles from Sunday. So his behavior. I mean, he didn't do anything terrible, but his arrogant behavior kind of, well, pride goes before the fall, I guess is what I'll say. Arrogant, showboating, and then loses the Super Bowl, and then really does not come across in a professional manner in the way that he walks out of the interview with the reporters. So, not a huge deal, but it's still something that he should work on, a minor character weakness. Next word is deify. This is a verb, and so this should be familiar to both sections, CP and honors, because we are past this already in CP, and honors, of course, has read it already. Juliet deifies Romeo. So she's doing something to him when she says he is the god. There's your clue of my idolatry. And of course, a deity is a god or a goddess. So if you deify someone, if you turn that into a verb, you're making a god of them. You're looking upon or worshiping them as a god. You're idolizing them. Oftentimes this happens in pop culture. We idolize, we deify people, especially athletes, people in movies, actors, actresses, singers, whatever. And it's okay to, really like them, but when we go so far as to deify them, we are not only doing them a disfavor, or a disservice, but we are sinning, because obviously that's not what God wants us to do. So the opposite would be to abhor that person or thing, which means to hate them. Detest, of course, means hate as well. So those would be opposites. So I found this picture, which I thought was very true. Unfortunately, man was never meant to be a god, but he is forever trying to deify himself. And that was said by a famous biblical writer. Well, not biblical writer, but a Christian writer, Martin Lloyd-Jones. And it is so true. We are always trying to put ourselves in the place of God. And unfortunately, that is obviously sin. And God has to work in our hearts to open our eyes to the fact that we're always trying to deify ourselves. Our next word is harp. Now, we're not talking about the instrument, and we do see a word we've had previously. If you carp, which means, again, to complain a lot, and harp, your audience will tune you out. If you are harping about something, you are doing it, so it's a verb, but it means to persist in talking continuously on or about something. You keep ranting and raving and going on, and it gets exhausting to listen to. You're rambling. Maybe you're complaining. You don't get what you want from your parents for your birthday, and you just talk and talk. Why didn't you get me this? Why? And I really hope nobody in here behaves that way, because you and I need to have a talk if that's true. But anyways, you've probably been around people who are harping all the time. So here's kind of a funny picture. You've got this person, and you can see they're totally obsessed with what they're saying with themselves, blah 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 blah. It's not really anything important, and they're talking so much that they've covered over the other person. You can't even see their face. The other person might as well not be there because they're so obsessed with what they have to say and not listening to the other person. Our next word is impetuous. The impetuous boy, so it is an adjective, often spoke before thinking, and that really is the definition. Spoke before thinking carefully about what he was going to say. And unfortunately, a lot of us have this tendency. You act suddenly without thought. You say things that you regret later. You act in an impulsive manner, very rash behavior. The opposite would be planned, careful, methodical. Now, I chose a picture from a version of Romeo and Juliet, the wedding scene, because obviously this was very impetuous behavior of them. They decide to get married. The second conversation that they have, they don't even know each other 24 hours when they do get married. And so they're going to reap the consequences of that by the end of the play. So, impetuous behavior. Our next word is impel. This is a verb. Because my mom promised me a new car if I made all A's in school, I was impelled to study hard. That's your motivation. You want that car, so you're going to keep working hard to get those good grades. So, impel is push into motion. It pushes you into studying, into opening those books, into completing all of your homework assignments. It urges you, it forces you, it propels you, it drives you. The opposite is restrained, because if you are restrained, you're holding back. So I put a picture of our championship football team this year holding the state trophy, because our athletes, and some of you guys are on that team, were impelled. You are motivated to win that state championship. And here's the end result. You get this great trophy, you get recognition, you got the state ring, and just got the satisfaction that you played hard and worked your guts out to earn that state championship. You were impelled to win that trophy. Next is benediction. This is a noun. As the troops prepared for battle, the chaplain gave them his benediction. Benediction comes from a Latin term which means blessing. So we often have pastors give benedictions at the end of church services. My pastor always does. The opposite would be a curse or a malediction. If you give a malediction, you're cursing someone. And so here's a typical benediction. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord smile on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord show you his favor and give you his peace. So benedictions oftentimes come from the Psalms, and they're a prayer, again, that the pastor would give at the end of a church service. We actually even see Friar Lawrence giving kind of a benediction, or a way of greeting, actually, Romeo when he arrives in Act 2. He says, Benedicte to Romeo. He wants to bless him and smile upon him. So these are our words for Lesson 14. Make sure to put your honor pledge after you complete Exercise 1.